I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
Ladies and gentlemen, the diabolical leader of the Head Knock
Everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to the newest episode of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So today, we are going to talk about something I've told you guys we would talk about soon. And really, it's because I'm finally in town for a period of time. I can actually finally focus on the podcast for a little bit. So hopefully that's encouraging to you guys. Hopefully you're like, wait, they've been putting out a lot of great stuff. They haven't been focused on the podcast. No, not at all. But now that we are in town for a period of time, should be able to generate some really great interviews for you guys. We just had Henry Akins on. Next week, we're going to have Robert Drysdale on for our Tuesday interview. And we're going to continue to have really good guests in person and start to go Zoom meetings again, start to have some guests that maybe we wouldn't get an option at if it wasn't for doing a Zoom meeting, at least for right now. And so we're on that train, on that content creation train. But today I thought we could start to at least lay out this relationship between old and new school. And I've told you guys for a while that is going to be my big focus. I'm going to focus for a while on coach-student relationships. I really haven't gotten started on that yet. I have a lot of different coaches and students that are committed to coming in and doing that. So that'll be really fun. But that being said, let's look at today's episode. So the reason I decided today is because I just come home from Master Worlds. It's a really awesome trip. It's a really fun trip. And just wanted to talk about it a little bit. And I thought this would be a perfect time. I thought this would be a simple way to look at, okay, here are some of the things that I noticed at Master Worlds that were really, really helpful, that were really noticeable. And then I thought we could look at, I got to compete at Adult Worlds too. Maybe look at a little contrast between the two of those and just kind of look at bridging the gap between the old school and the new school. And I have a lot of cool stories about that and kind of how valuable that can be. But I really also think I'm going to be bringing on a lot of really cool people that will help us understand, help us not lose the great jiu-jitsu that the last generation has discovered, especially not lose it simply out of arrogance. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. All right, guys, like I said, we have Robert Drysdale on next Tuesday, so in like just a couple days. And in his episode, so if you guys don't know, he is coming off writing two historical jiu-jitsu books, kind of being one of the first people to actually lay out where this art came from that we do and we love. And it really, he wrote his second book and I got to read it, and it kind of blew my mind. There was a lot of things that happened in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and then in the 2000s that continue almost as a cycle in jiu-jitsu. And to me, I've never really seen anybody lay it out the way that Robert Drysdale did. And so I'm not going to, in this episode, look at that. I'm not going to look at a true history of jiu-jitsu and true historical significance. We're going to look at history of jiu-jitsu training, history of jiu-jitsu techniques instead. And so I thought a really simple thing that we could define to start this episode is we can kind of define old and new school. What are those two things, and kind of, is it good that they're separate? Is it something that we should keep separate? And I think I have a lot of opinions on this. And I just also want to make sure that I deliver to you guys why I think I have some authority on speaking on this stuff. So for me, obviously, I have done jiu-jitsu for a long time. I've done it for 15 years. Still, though, there are a lot of people that have done jiu-jitsu twice as long as me. There are a lot of people that have done jiu-jitsu longer than I have been alive. Okay. And so that does not put me in the old school, right? It puts me pretty moderate school if you really look at what jiu-jitsu is now. But when I look at that, I see, okay, there are all these people that have trained before me and have come up before me. And my generation, maybe when I was in the 5 to 10 year of training range. So when would that have been? 2013, and I think in after that, in that generation, in my opinion, jiu-jitsu was not very Americanized still. Okay. There were a few guys that were starting to learn how to sell products, and there were a few guys that were starting to teach jiu-jitsu in English in 2013. But I've told you guys a few times how much interaction I've been able to have recently with Henry Akins. And something he talks about is like, yeah, I really had in 2015, I had one of the first jiu-jitsu websites. That was only 8 years ago. Was not that long ago. We are no doubt in a different era of jiu-jitsu than when I started. Okay. The way you learn technique, the way you learn ideas, the way jiu-jitsu is taught, the way jiu-jitsu is trained, the way that we compete, the way people are being paid. All of those things were non-existent when I started jiu-jitsu. Even up until 2012, 2013, they just started then. And in that time, I really think that my generation, and I can't speak for other people's, maybe every generation has done this. But I think that my generation did a really, really, really bad job. I think that my generation could have looked at jiu-jitsu completely differently. But there was this weird dynamic. There was the new school guys who could make their jiu-jitsu work, and they were doing new techniques and they were exploring new ideas. And then there were the old school guys, and kind of how you would differentiate is, oh, these guys are the old school guys are smash passers, and the new school guys, they pass disconnected, or they just are all guard pullers. And that was really the big divide between the two. And in that generation, a lot of the people that got to speak for my generation, a lot of the people that got to have a really great voice for my generation, they gave wrong opinions. They were arrogant, and they thought, well, I know now, therefore I have nothing else to learn. And I see that as, to me, when somebody gets good at jiu-jitsu, they actually check that box and they are actually a good grappler. And to me, this is, you are good probably when you're a black belt. In the way that I look at jiu-jitsu, obviously there can be very good blue belts, there can be very good white belts. But in context for me, I'm thinking of someone who is very good at grappling, or good at grappling, as at least black belt skill wise. That entry level black belt. And in that, there is still so much more to learn. But so many black belts will get their black belt, and I have a few opinions on why this is, but they will get their black belt and they'll stop learning. A lot of people, this is not uncommon. People get their black belt and they actually stop training. They continue to teach, they continue to show technique, but they stop training. And this is when we can kind of look at the old school and what they are doing. Because we kind of started with, okay, so this is at least what new school was to me when I was coming up. And then the old school guys were generally guys that came up in an even more violent atmosphere of jiu-jitsu than I did. And an even tougher environment than I did. And so, and generally almost everybody that I would deal with that was new, that was old school looking at me as the new school guy, they didn't like that I didn't fight MMA. They didn't like that this new generation did not fight MMA. Okay. So there is these are like the big controversial topics in jiu-jitsu. And then it became this self-defense versus sport jiu-jitsu. Well, do the sport jiu-jitsu guys who pull guard, could they even fight? And there was this, there's just a lot of separation between those two ideologies. And something that I will note, I said I wouldn't really get too much into Robert Drysdale's new book, but something I will note is that this relationship between old school and new school seems to, even before jiu-jitsu was actually jiu-jitsu, it seems like this dynamic has always been bad. That there has never, that to me, that the arrogance that the old school guys have and the arrogance that the young school guys or the new school guys have, they don't mesh very well. And let's start to look at kind of, even to me, I'm getting to a point. It will not be long now that, and maybe you guys are even saying it in your car right now, that I'm not even moderate school anymore, that I'm just old school. And this is kind of how jiu-jitsu has always been. And it's always been presented as you have your OGs and then you have your people that are newer. And it tends to be one of those things that the newer guys, they want to innovate. They care so much about making their presence known in the jiu-jitsu space. But then the old school guys, they said, hey, I had this amazing time. I did all these amazing things using jiu-jitsu. You have so much more you could probably learn from me. And oftentimes, for whatever reason, they don't. And so that is what we're going to focus most of today's episode about. And so here we're just going to look at some other thoughts on kind of the reasons that there are these generational gaps, right? Obviously, age is a really simple factor. I was telling you guys earlier, why do I think that I have any ability to talk on these things? Obviously, I've done jiu-jitsu for a long time, but a perspective that I have gotten that adult athletes don't seem to get is that I came up with my dad, who was also training jiu-jitsu with me. My dad was, my dad's now in his 60s, still a black belt, still training jiu-jitsu. And we both started together. We started 15 years ago, 16 years ago together at the same time, trying to learn jiu-jitsu together. And, in that time, I got to see that there were almost two versions of jiu-jitsu. There was like jiu-jitsu for athletes and jiu-jitsu for non-athletes. And for me, obviously, as an adult competitor, as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, I am doing adult jiu-jitsu, athletic jiu-jitsu that absolutely works great. And my dad really can't. And I'm almost like pulling away from my dad skill-wise, it seemed. And we talked about this last week. We talked about this idea of learning to roll without strength. It was this point in jiu-jitsu where I was a newer purple belt, and I was very good at purple belt. And I realized that I actually wasn't. I realized that athleticism, flexibility, speed, being young was making me good at jiu-jitsu more than any of the other things. The fact that I could just train way more than anybody was making me good at jiu-jitsu. And so that's when I decided on this idea, like we talked about last week, of trying to remove physical attributes from my jiu-jitsu game. The only reason that I recognized this as a significant thing is because I had been side by side with my dad, seeing his physical attributes diminish, yet he continued to get better at jiu-jitsu. So there was something there. This idea, there was something to make this idea work. And so we started on it. We started to mess with rolling without strength, rolling without physical attributes, and things started to change. This is really when I started to learn conceptually, is because it couldn't just be about hitting these specific techniques. sometimes it had to be about learning how to not be doing anything and not be getting submitted, not be behind on anything. But in that time, I really started to get some appreciation for the old school guys that I was dealing with. The old school guys that a lot of them still did have way too aggressive of opinions about guard pulling, or just lived in these very absolute worlds that they love to live in. But I noticed that I was learning more from those guys, and I was finding it because they were playing jiu-jitsu in a way that they were playing jiu-jitsu with diminished attributes, with diminished physical attributes. These 40-plus-year-old guys were getting weaker, slower, less flexible, more injury prone, and they were still finding ways to get better at jiu-jitsu. And this is kind of, like really the big thing that I have for you guys today is it's really just going to be about the big idea. I guess the big takeaway is really going to be about respect and what that actually means, what respect actually is. And just kind of looking at how you can, as a new school guy, look at the generation that is above you and learn so much from them, and honestly be liked by them, and be respected by those people, because for most of us that does matter. And then how you can be an older school person and see this new generation coming up that is, as Robert Drysdale put it in the book, the Instagram era of jiu-jitsu. And for a lot of us that came up in a time where you never talked about your wins and you never talked about your wins in the gym, to now where you film your rolls and you argue with people on Instagram all day, and blue belts are challenging each other on Facebook, to have a match that pays $0. It's a different world. And so I want to make sure to look at how both sides can benefit, though, because both sides can benefit from just cooperating. And so we looked at the reasons behind where we at in my notes. Holy cow, provide actionable steps already. Okay, let's do it. So when we are looking at this whole idea of old school and new school not seeing eye to eye, they came up doing different types of jiu-jitsu. I want to look at first just the benefits. Let's just simply lay out what benefits you would gain if you were on either side of the spectrum and you could meet in the middle. First, we're looking at... What's up, guys? Josh McKinney here, sitting down with my dad, Steve, and we are just talking about something exciting. We run simplifyingjujitsu.com together, and we have really the biggest product we've ever put together, the most work we've ever put into a product. And it is called Efficient BJJ Strength in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I wanted to call it Train Muscles and Save Joints, but I like yours better.
I think that is one of the biggest benefits, is the fact that you do save your joints and you don't hurt your muscles. But I think one of the biggest selling points is that it's 15 minutes a week, maybe twice a week.
But you get stronger. And that is the number one idea behind what we do. And then what we do is we put things in a simplified, logical, common sense order, so that you can kind of see how to enhance your training and keep yourself from hurting yourself outside of the gym, because jiu-jitsu is hard enough on your body.
There is so much injury risk in jiu-jitsu. Why in the heck would we have injury risk in our training?
Absolutely.
And so to me, right now, it makes a lot of sense already. But if someone were to purchase it in this month, what's really exciting is we have this thing going called Steve's Bundle. We're also going to throw in, for half off, how to train jiu-jitsu and 60, what is it? Train until 60 and beyond, 60 moves that work into your 60s.
Wait. Say that again, Josh. What do they get?
But wait, there's more. If you, for 50% off, you can get How to Train Jiu-Jitsu, which is a Steve and Josh McKinney product, and 60 moves that work when you're 60, which I was watching back recently. We have a long-haired Bryce Allen getting neon bellied. That was when I made the post about him dying and us reviving him, and his mom was calling. She actually thought we killed him. Yeah. Woof. Great thing, but great product too.
Yes, it'll be helpful. It really does help people, and it'll allow them to think differently. It is different than anything that anyone has out there.
And so the only way to get it is to go to simplifyingjujitsu.com. You can go to simplifyingjujitsu.com/15. That will take you to a page that gives you a little more information, gives you some thumbnail, or gives you some interviews with different athletes that have benefited, and just a lot more information on the product itself. And you guys can check that out at simplifyingjujitsu.com. Meet in the middle. First, we're looking at new school guys. I am, as an adult black belt athlete, I'm an adult black belt athlete. You can't be old school and be an adult black belt athlete, right? Or at least at the correct age. And so what I see by that, I go, okay, well, I'm not really there yet. That's why I claim moderate, right? So for my generation and all the adult black belt athletes that I am competing against, they like to listen to 3 people as their online coaches in jiu-jitsu. I think there are probably 3 main coaches that, maybe you can separate a gi from no gi. Maybe there's 2 gi and 3 no gi. But basically there are very, very small groups of people that people are getting all of their ideas from. And I get the reason. The reason is because these are the guys that are winning. And so why wouldn't we just listen to whoever is winning? Well, I think a really simple reason is you don't hear most people credit their current victory to the instructionals that they watched at white belt, right? Even though they were really high level coaches, even though they're these amazing guys, and it creates this problem. It creates this problem where now John Danaher says that I need to fulcrum this guy's elbow, and my coach says I need to break his arm. And does that mean my coach is incompetent? Does that mean my coach is wrong? And this is the new school generation of jiu-jitsu. This is the YouTube generation of jiu-jitsu. There are all these opinions and all these guys telling you this is how you should do jiu-jitsu. And they love to deal in absolutes and act like their way is the only way. And I think that this, like I said, my generation did a terrible job at getting us here, right? Getting us to this point. As a new school guy, you could learn so much more about ideology, about concept, about thought from just simply having good conversations with people that have been around longer than you, that think about these things differently than you. Now I'll give you guys some specific stuff for me. Like I said, I'm an adult athlete. There is this bizarre thing in jiu-jitsu where you start to get quote unquote good, and people think that that is elite. People think that that is mastery. It is not. Most black belts that I roll with, it's not very hard for me to beat them up. Right? And again, I am not elite still. You can look at my jiu-jitsu competition history. I have not beaten the elite guys. I'm not elite. Yet most black belts that I roll with, I kind of dismantle. Most everybody I roll with, I kind of dismantle. And it's just because that's how high that level is. Now, that being said, so often people even look at me and say stuff like this. I generally yell at them. It's like, why would you need to go learn from this guy? Why would you go spend all that money on a seminar learning from this guy? I literally do that in hopes that I can find one sentence to help me get better. One little idea, one little way of looking at things to help me get better. But for whatever reason, there comes this point where people think, okay, now I can no longer be a student. I have to be an instructor. Wrong. Anyone who thinks that way is a bad instructor. Any instructor, any coach that is not learning themselves is a bad coach, even if they were great at one point. It's just not how the world works. The game is going to evolve. Things are going to evolve. The athletes that you're dealing with, the strategies are going to evolve. And so as a coach, you have to be learning constantly. You have to be learning how to learn. That's really what most of your job is. When I'm going to these these seminars and private lessons and learning from all different coaches, what I'm trying to do is become a better athlete, of course. But then once I do that, I'm going to try to conceptualize these ideas again and deliver them to my students. Right. And then hopefully there's another person I find in another coach. That brings me to this point where I get to in Vegas and Master Worlds. I'll give you guys a few stories now. So this Master Worlds was really, really fun. It was we brought a good group of competitors between Head Nod HQ and Head Nod Training Center, Jerseyville, and we got had some really good performances. Had a few people do well at Jiu-Jitsu Con. Brought home 2 bronzes from Jiu-Jitsu Con. But then last day, last competitor, my blue belt, spoiler alert, now purple belt, Nick, had 5 matches and was able to win his division for Master Worlds. And so it was really, really fun experience. It was for our gym, it's the first time that we ever had somebody win a major at any age group, since we've had a gym. And so it was a really, really cool experience for everybody. It's really fun. But then afterwards, Nick had asked me before, I had this private scheduled with Henry Akins, and he says, hey, if I win my division, do you think I could be the Uki for your private? And first of all, I have this flashback of I had just done a seminar with Henry a couple weeks before. It was like a 2-day seminar, and he was putting like side control pressure on me and stuff. And it was terrible. It was horrific. And I was like, oh yeah, Nick, you can definitely come and be the Uki for that if you win. And it turns out he has 5 matches, he wins. And so we literally go from this poor dude getting off the podium, getting his belt, drive straight to Henry's studio to learn, and just get to pick his brain for like 2 straight hours. And I pick his brain on guard passing for 2 hours. I travel the country teaching guard passing. I've passed some really high level guards in competition. I actually have an instructional coming out that people are messaging me about almost daily. Could you please just release this freaking instructional? Get what I mean? Are you hearing what I'm saying? I'm really good at guard passing already. This dude blew my mind the entire time. Me and my students, who really, I teach in a way that I share my thoughts on guard passing, not my techniques. And Henry teaches very similarly, just better. And he teaches in a way that shares his thoughts. And his thoughts on how to pass were so clear and so concise and so helpful. And to me, probably sped me up 10 times on progression. I know that sounds ridiculous, but the only reason I can claim this is because I have never fallen into the trap of stopping learning from people. I will learn from people who started before me. I will learn from new school, and I will learn from old school. And I've never cared. And that has given me this ability to be able to go, there's something exceptional that this guy's teaching. I've learned from everybody, bro. There's something different about the jiu-jitsu that this guy is sharing. And had I have fallen into the mindset that most people fall into, even as a coach, like it shows weakness or something to go learn from somebody. It's just not true. That is not how winners think. That is not how the greats have ever thought. And you got to get yourself out of this thought process. Trust me on this. If you're willing to listen to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, I'm probably better at jiu-jitsu than you. I probably am. But here's the thing. That doesn't matter. That does not mean that all of a sudden anything I say is automatically has more authority than something you think, right? Or that your coach thinks. You just take what you can get from me. You listen to what I have. Maybe not everything I have is perfectly developed yet. Maybe it's not a perfect thought yet. And when we get trapped in the mindset that we have to be perfectly right now, and we can't change our ideas because we said last week that this is how it is, and now I maybe think of it a little bit differently. And if people just on both sides of old school and new school started to think with that perspective, started to think with, hey, maybe I should just focus on progression. Maybe I should stop worrying about if people are doing self-defense or competition or gi or no gi. Maybe none of that has any effect on me at all. And I choose to dislike people that train slightly differently, but jiu-jitsu all the time, that all their life is dedicated to jiu-jitsu, but I don't like them because they train at a different gym under a different coach, train slightly different art. I don't think what they do is jiu-jitsu. To me, that is ignorance. All of that is ignorance. That whole mindset that we cannot be learning from the last generation. And when you look at things, I really see that my generation was shaped by certain statements. I remember specifically the statement that nobody of the last generation or a couple generations ago was actually good. They wouldn't be able to handle adult purple belts of this generation. Is that true? I really don't think so. I really do not think so. I would almost bet anything that if we could build a time machine and bring back some of the greats of jiu-jitsu, that they truly would still be great. Because jiu-jitsu is not about technique memorization and it's not about technique innovation. Jiu-jitsu is about skills. It's about developing skills. And when we start to look at, oh, well, this generation or these guys, they've come up with these new leg locks or they've come up with these new guards or they've come up with this new whatever. None of that crap really matters because that idea, if you teach it to a brand new guy, it will get trounced by a guy who's a little bit better that's never even heard the idea. Why is that? That's because jiu-jitsu is about skill. It is not just about technique collection, right? And so many people want jiu-jitsu to be painted into this singular box that jiu-jitsu is this. But when you really look at what an art is, and you look at an art like jiu-jitsu that can be expressed in so many different ways, people are creating all kinds of different content ideas related to jiu-jitsu all the time. I was just watching Devin Prada mic'd up while he was coaching the class. Absolutely hilarious. New content idea. You know what I mean? Like you see that idea, like, well, that's a really good idea for jiu-jitsu content. Is it a video of Devin doing jiu-jitsu? Well, no, technically not. But it's a video of him expressing the art as a teacher and sharing that video in a different form for you, right? And so I guess the big takeaways from today, and I know this is a shorter, very ranty episode, but the big takeaways from today are you keep learning and you will probably not even deal with any of this old school versus new school crap. And the reason I say this, I've told this story on the podcast before. Jared, the head of my affiliation, Jared Weiner, showed a guard pass last time he was in town. And it was like, I think it was X guard. It was something really smooth. And the guy that he showed it to goes, oh, wow, like old school. And Jared used to always say stuff like, oh, this is really old school. This is really old school. And this time he goes, nah. He says, there's just jiu-jitsu. There isn't old school and new school. And when he said that, that was when I started to really think on this idea. Started to really go, hey, it's just jiu-jitsu. There is no old school and new school. Don't get caught up in, oh, well, this guy, this guy did this guy did that. A lot of times, the best way to learn is through a lot of different perspectives. At least the best way to become high level is with a lot of different perspectives. For instance, when I look at my friend Chris Paynes and look at some of the defensive jiu-jitsu stuff that he has shown me, makes me a better teacher, makes it so much easier for me to defend other people's jiu-jitsu. Now, it took Chris years and years and years and years of deep diving on that idea to come away with these few sentences that were helpful to me. For me, why would I need to dive any deeper? This dude's a genius. I trust his jiu-jitsu. He dove deep enough for me. And now I take those sentences and I apply them. And then maybe I go to Henry Akins and I learn some of these ideas on connection and on weight distribution. Like, okay, I need to apply these ideas next. And I need to focus on these ideas. I need to understand these ideas deeply. And maybe one day when I do that, I'll have something new to work on. But that endless progression and that self-obsession when it comes to your own jiu-jitsu skill, it will keep you from worrying about what people wear and what people say and who they bow to and anything else. And it will allow you to get better at jiu-jitsu on your own. And when you look at always learning, whether you're old school or new school, and you teach that idea that, hey, you have so much to learn, but so do I, and I'm still learning. And you can share that with your students. You create an environment that doesn't really have old school and new school. It just has knowledge, and it head nod. If you come visit and you have some knowledge, people are going to do everything they can to siphon that knowledge out of you. You're going to be like, dude, this is the most annoying group of people I've ever met. They wouldn't shut up. They wouldn't leave me alone. I just wanted to train. Everyone wanted to ask me questions, right? It's because that is everybody's goal is just to get good. It's just like, hey, this is the goal. Who cares who we have to ask for help to get good? And so that is what I'll leave you guys with today. The idea of old school versus new school, how we can marry those two generations together. And keep in mind, this is my first thoughts on something we're going to really told you guys about deep dives. For me as a podcaster, this relationship between coach and student and the last generation and the new generation and how to do it is going to be the focus for the next while on the podcast. Besides, obviously, the focus of just getting better at jiu-jitsu, which is always the focus on the podcast. But it'll be the next subplot that we have going. And so that is all I have for you guys today. Let's turn it over to Josh. Let him finish this episode out. All right, guys. And that is today's episode. Be sure to check out, if you guys have not yet, been pushing a lot of Henry Akins at you, be sure to check out his interview that we just did on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show 2 weeks ago. It is one of my favorites. I have probably gotten in the last 2 weeks to learn about 10 total hours from Henry. And I am starting to understand some of what he's talking about and I've only asked about one topic. There are all these other topics that he's like, yeah, we could get into that. And I'm like, I'm not ready yet. Please don't. I'm not there yet. And so just in one topic, I have spent 10 hours of study with him directly, a lot on YouTube, a lot on other things. And then obviously getting to do the interview with him and stuff like that. I just really think that there's a lot to be learned from this guy. I think that there's a lot to be learned from the last generation. And I think that people just don't, they get closed-minded. I think that some people heard, specifically about Henry, like, yeah, I heard somebody say that, the hidden jiu-jitsu stuff, it wasn't true. It is. It's true. I promise. You guys can trust me. You've been able to trust me for 200 plus episodes. You've seen me get so much better as a jiu-jitsu athlete. And it's because we leave no stone unturned on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, besides steroids. And to me, while I'm turning stones, you find Henry Akins and get some interaction with him. Like, oh, the knowledge is just there. The knowledge has been out there this whole time. Why haven't I gotten to ask this guy yet? So that's where I'm at with my jiu-jitsu. Had a really great time at Master Worlds. Got pictures with people and got to talk to different fans of the show, which is kind of bizarre that that's happening. Me and Bryce and I were talking about it on our drive home, after the whole trip, and just kind of decompressing a little. And it was that thought of like, life's changed a little bit this year, huh? When I see the podcast, when I see the growth of everything, and just how cool people have been to us lately, and just there's been some changes, and yeah, that's what I'll leave you guys with. Thank you guys for supporting the show. As always, if you love it, share it with somebody. Give somebody the gift of sucking less at jiu-jitsu. And I hope that is the gift that I have been giving to you guys. Hopefully you guys have been getting help from the show. But that's all I have for you guys today. We'll be back with Robert Drysdale next week. And I have a different solo episode for you guys. We're going to start on a series soon. I don't know exactly when, but we're going to be starting on a new series very, very soon. And half of it is so nerdy. And so I'll make sure to tie in some cool guy interviews during that time, because the solo episodes are going to be I have an episode titled, and I'll let you guys in on this, Jiu-Jitsu is ... Dragon Ball Z. And obviously that's a nerdy title of an episode, but I've literally been thinking about this episode for years. And then I was going to do it, and I put it off because Stronghold BJJ podcast, freaking Wade Barden beat me to it. He beat me to it, man. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a little time to cook. And honestly, he did a good job on it too. And that was what was frustrating. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll just have to rewatch Dragon Ball Z again and find new things. And so I've been doing that, and that'll be one of the episodes in the series Jiu-Jitsu Is. So it will be Jiu-Jitsu Is ... And we're going to look at all kinds of other things that we can, and for me, probably a lot of my other hobbies and interests, and relating them to jiu-jitsu. And so I think it'll be really fun. But that's all I have for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I hope that today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.